I'm here to talk about marketing farm-captured carbon to the corporate sector. If I can get this to move. There we go. Nope. Okay, so it's through the Carbon Connects project. And that consists of 16 partners from 5 countries, France, Holland, Belgium, Ireland and the UK. And the partners include local government, business, research institutions and landowners across those 5 countries. And the primary aim of Carbon Connects is to reduce the high carbon footprint of peatland soils in the northwest of Europe by introducing new business models to support sustainable land management practices. I'll get this right sometime. Okay, so they're the partners. So it's an international partnership, and we're looking to target international corporate business to sell carbon. So, as we've talked about, farming is going through a very uncertain time, and what might future farming incomes look like? So we think, well, there may be 3 basic income streams here. To maximise profits through the core farm operation, and Chris has talked a lot about MSO, and to maximise profits, perhaps using that business model. The other 2 legs are around the payment for protection of natural capital and the payment for the ecosystem services that are derived from that natural capital. So we have the public money to support agriculture, and Andy will talk about what Elms is starting to look like a little bit later on. And we also have the opportunity or the possibility to lever in corporate investment into farming as well through the sale of ecosystem services and the protection of natural capital. Anyway, natural capital, Chris has talked about it, and it's the capital. It's nature. It's what we have in the bank. In over hundreds of years, we've spent more capital than we've put away, and that's the issue. So, looking at this, so payments for ecosystem services. So on the left, if I can borrow your stick, Chris. Oh, there it is. Okay. So on the left, we have land managed for agricultural production, which gives profit from the farm operation, let's say. And then if we move away from that and look at farming the whole landscape, as well as the core farming operation, there's the opportunity for additional income streams around ecosystem services. But as Chris has pointed out, with MSO, there's a chance to actually grow the private profits, and with low input farming, there's the benefit is that ecosystem services are then produced as a result of that low input farming. So in effect, what we could have potentially is enhanced farm profits increased by payments for ecosystem services. So the scale of the challenge is massive. So if we're going to go carbon neutral by 2050, which is what the experts tell us that we need to do, we need to take some serious action. So peatlands cover 3% of the world's surface, but they store 500 gigatons or 500 billion tons of carbon. And that's twice the carbon that's stored in all the global woodlands across the world. And peatlands captures 0.37 gigatons annually. But peatlands are preserved by having a high water table. And peatlands, if they dry out, they stop becoming carbon sinks and become carbon emitters. So the University of Greifswald in eastern Germany is worked back from, if we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050, we need to re-wet 2 million hectares per year across the world globally every year between now and 2050. And half of that should be in Europe. So if that's the scale of the challenge, what's the scale of the opportunity? So this is tracking the price of carbon futures between June and October 2021. And it's round about £60 per tonne at the moment. And it's estimated that by 2050, at today's prices, the price of carbon should be somewhere between £200 and £700 a tonne to sell. So the opportunity potentially is huge. So why would corporate investors support British farming? As Chris has said, it's all about the protection of natural capital and protecting the ecosystem services that arise from that. So we spoke about carbon offsetting on the farm walk, and there could be some ethical issues there, but people like airlines are looking to offset the carbon footprint. There's environmental resilience to consider. There's supply chain security to consider as well. So these are reasons why investors may support what we're looking to do. And they're looking to achieve themselves to get to net zero by 2030 or 2050, and to support their national efforts to do that. There are ethics to think about, customer expectations and shareholder expectations that businesses are ethical and that they do look after the planet and do engage with corporate social responsibility. So how do we then market? The carbon storage to corporates? So the Carbon Connects project will develop business cases to present to corporate business, and they'll lay out what investment opportunities are available, why corporates should invest in those opportunities, and how will that work. And there's an opportunity for people to get involved in that. We've talked about measuring carbon for payment. Really difficult. But the Carbon Connects partners will develop measurement methods that may include vegetation cover assessment. It could look at soil bulk density, or it could be monitoring greenhouse gas emissions from peatlands. But again, there's the opportunity for farmers to get involved in that process through Carbon Connects. And Carbon Connects will develop a process to link carbon measurements to payments. And again, there's an opportunity to get involved in designing and verifying those processes and those contracts. So how would corporate to farmer contact work? The project will develop a farmer support package, and that will consist of everything the farmer needs to know about how the carbon is measured, how the carbon is valued, how to market the carbon to investors, and how to manage those carbon contracts. And there's an opportunity to get involved in that. So the project's looking to attract 5 farmers per country to get involved in this. So that's 25 farmers in total who are prepared to review the farming methods to capture and store carbon on peatlands, and to be prepared to get involved in how to create a corporate investment market, to validate those carbon measurement methods, and to validate the link between measured carbon, contracts, and payments, and also to get involved in the development of a farmer support package to make those things happen. So if anybody wants to get involved in this, please talk to me. Thank you very much. Are there any questions on that? I apologise for the technical difficulties. Okay. Right, so...
Looking for farmers with peat?
On this one, yes, Chris. Yeah. We've been working with with Tom and Jimmy it's on MSO on grass, but this is particularly about carbon storage on peat. And of course, looking at the ecosystem services market, I feel like carbon capture and storage is the means to perhaps deliver other ecosystem services such as biodiversity, flood risk, water quality, that kind of thing. So the point I'm really trying to make is that with looking at MSO, looking at low input farming, by definition, you're then creating those ecosystem services and protecting natural capital that other businesses may well want to invest in. So, Elms allegedly is looking at public money for public goods. You can sell the same ecosystem services to the private sector that the government is looking to buy through the Elms process. Yes, Jim.
These other businesses that are looking to invest, are they going to actually make any change themselves, or are they just looking to do it for them?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose a bit of both, really. Shareholders and customers. We talked about the Defra building being occupied today, but people have got very strong views about this. We've got Insulated Britain who are blocking the M25. The temperature of all this is rising very, very quickly, and business is responding to that, and generally want to make a difference. Want to reduce their carbon footprint, but also be seen to do that. To placate their shareholders, to placate their customers, and to demonstrate that they are, corporately socially responsible. So, airlines buying carbon to offset their carbon footprint, perhaps is questionable ethically, but it is a market. It is a market that is available to invest in carbon capture on farm. And of course, mineral soils, as we've said, can capture carbon as well. And it's all about, it's marketing. It's telling the story of what farms like this one do produce. So the lamb and the beef and the pork produced on this farm is low intensity, low carbon, low food miles, and it's a different product altogether to importing Amazonian beef that's being fed on grain lots in the Amazon. And it's telling that story that meat is not meat, and it's all part of that. So part of what we're looking to do to talk to corporates, to get people involved, we've got things called story maps, where it's map based. We can run videos. You can say I'm really good at running videos. You can put documents in there, photographs, and kind of lead people through what's happening and why. So we're developing a story map for this farm to market this farm as a business that other businesses may want to invest in because of the things that they're doing. Because livestock production can, as Chris has said, can be environmentally positive. Should be environmentally positive. It's producing food, but it's also producing those services, the clean air, the clean water, the flood risk reduction, all of those things that people aren't paid for at the moment, but need to get paid for. And if Elms does what it says on the tin, and Andy will give us an update in a couple of minutes about that, that's what people should be paid for. It's not about income forgone. It's about providing a definite service to the rest of the community, which farmers do now, but don't get paid for. Yes, sir.
I just want to ask you about the funding, and somebody who knows a lot more about Elms, but as I understand it, Elms is a payment for a public good, and you're talking about producing a payment for a private good, which is for the good of the company. So I'm just wondering whether the government would fund a private good, because I think it's unlikely.
Well,
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I don't know the answer to that question.
So in other words, I'm not convinced you could double claim, you see what I mean?
Well, I think it depends upon what Elms looks like, and the rules around that. But in principle, there is a market out there. Firms like Coca-Cola do invest in peatland restoration. big multinational companies, because I think they generally want to make a difference, but be seen to make a difference as well. So how that interaction between private finance and public finance could work, I think that's down into the detail of what Elms comes forward to do. But in principle, they're both the public market and the private market are looking to value the same things. It's about the protection and restoration of natural capital and the services that produces.
I don't know if somebody else might add some more to it, but government might take the role of, say you've got a peat bog on your farm, the government might see a role, will help fund the restoration of that as a resort, but then the companies would then say, well, we'll fund the sequestration that goes after the restoration is done. So there would be, you wouldn't get paid for the same thing for two different things. You're being paid different elements, one for restoration from the taxpayer and one for the sequestration from private. But whether that's, I mean, that's just some thinking, but I don't know, maybe you heard different things. Probably is.
I think it's all up in the air at the
Yeah.
moment, but you're right, double funding is, and that's one reason why you can't currently go into SFI pilot if you're already in countryside stewardship. So the principal liberties are unlikely to pay twice for doing the same thing. The question with a private one, if depends on the motive of the private company for funding you, they may simply want to have on their books and be happy to pay you something on top of what you're getting paid for the government, because it's worth more to them than it is. They've got extra security that they might offer you a 30-year agreement, and the government's offering you a 5-year agreement. So there are people, for instance, Commons in Cumbria, where they're being paid to plant trees, and then the commoners might get some payment, and then the owner is getting carbon credits on top of that. So it's messy, it's a wild west, it's very unclear, and you have to make sure you can. But interestingly, on one of those commons, they are really watching, because the companies come round and said, you're not keeping your trees well enough, and we're going to ask that money back if you don't keep those trees in good condition. So there's no such thing as a free lunch with any of this money.
Yes, as I say, that interaction between public money and private money, as a environmental charity, we get government money, but we also get private money as well, and we match the two. So to deliver a project, it could be 50% funded by the government, 50% funded by somebody else. And what we're looking at here is two completely separate processes. So there's 16 partners there. There's Dutch universities working on blue and carbon credits that will come through this particular project. And how might they work? It could be vegetation assessment by drone. It could be looking at peat soil density. It could be monitoring, grass, greenhouse gas production. From peatlands. I visited a carbon farm in Lancashire, run by the Lancashire Wildlife Trust a couple of weeks ago, and they've established a 2-hectare farm, a kind of space where they've taken the topsoil off. It's in lowland peat, it's on permanent pasture, and they're monitoring the carbon emissions from the permanent grassland and the carbon emissions on their 2-hectare carbon farm. So that's been top 4 inches stripped off. They've built water storage, they've built irrigation channels, and they've planted 150,000 sphagnum plugs. About 15 months ago, and they've grown quite slowly because of the dry summer. But when they measure the gas emissions from the grassland on the peat, they're measuring 22 tonnes per hectare per year, whereas on the wet, almost bare peat, I would say it's 90% bare, because these sphagnum plugs haven't really spread a great deal. They're measuring 2 tonnes per hectare per year. From the bare wet peat as opposed to the peat under grass. So, and when that peat spreads across, that site will be a carbon sink. And what they're what they're looking to do is to then promote that practice to farmers to grow peat to grow sphagnum on peatlands as a carbon sink. There's other opportunities to grow sphagnum to feed the supply chain for peatland restoration, or indeed for the horticultural market. But the thing is, if you're re-wetting the peat and keeping the water table at that high level, then the carbon is being held in the peat as opposed to being released atmosphere. The soils there were 50% carbon. A mineral soil, I don't know, it's 8-10% carbon. So it's those peatland soils under that vascular vegetation are emitting carbon in the long term. So it's the land use is the key to this. And to think that you're looking at kind of highly productive arable farmland that's currently that's peatland in Lincolnshire and the Fens and what have you, that really should be growing something else, because they're emitting tons and tons of peat. And what's happening with other partners is they're looking at wet agriculture, growing, rushes and cat's tails for building purposes, for fiberboard and things like that. So it's looking at food production on certain land types and other production on other land types. It's all about production, but different kinds of production at the same level. So if peatlands are covering 3% of the world's surface and hold twice as much carbon as every forest in the world, they're small areas, but they're highly important. And that is where the carbon market will be driven. Just through demand. If the world is seriously carbon neutral by 2050, things need to change on a massive scale. And people who are farming peatlands should have a really big opportunity to utilise that for the businesses. What that looks like on a technical level, and how that interacts with elms, which is under development as well, and how that might work with a completely different process targeted at private corporate sector. That's up for definition, and the Carbon Connects project with those partners is looking to define that, and by September 2024 have a pilot scheme in place across those 5 countries with those 25 farmers to demonstrate that this can be done. But the detail is to be worked out, and what I'm doing here really is today is the launch of this project in this part of the UK. And if people want to be part of that, to help develop those kind of processes and systems, please talk to me.